quorum. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. We are a light crew today, but we will go ahead and get started. First up is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at those. Does anyone have any questions, additions, or suggestions for edits on those minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept them.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes as they've been presented, please raise your hands. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. The Inspector General has provided us with a printed update. There is a one-pager that has a breakdown of complaints and investigation data. There is also a redistribution of the report from July of 2023. If you'll take note, the last page of the 2023 report does give a breakdown of decisions and outcomes. I think a board member had asked to see a copy of those, or at least be reminded of it, and that is from the July report. Early after the first of the year, we should get an updated report from the IG, but I wanted to give everybody a moment just to take a look at the handout. And IG Hendricks, do you have anything else you'd like to add or otherwise present to the board?
Nope, this would be it if anyone has any questions. And thank you for mentioning the year-end report.
Absolutely.
The only question I'd have is whether our review board plans to put together an annual report as well, or are we, merging some of this in terms of part of this? I know part of our charge is to put together an annual report. I know obviously issues in terms of capacity and staff has been a challenge, but was wondering if we had a plan in place as a board to put together a separate report to council and the mayor's office.
So, and I would have to go back and look in our meeting minutes, because I think we discussed the report, I want to say just before August of last year, because that's when the first code duty would have been to prepare a report. And Mr. Tobias, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we said then that the report from the IG is the report, but if you know any differently, I'd love to hear it.
I'm just looking at 235.03 of City Code, which is Civilian Police Review Board duties under under B. The Civilian Police Review Board shall report annually to City Council on the disposition of complaints, the outcome of investigations reviewed by the board, as well as the board's actions and recommendations, which may include division operations, discipline recommendations, trends and patterns, officer-involved shootings, and any issues pertaining to instances of racial profiling or bias. So, the language in that section, I think, puts it squarely on the board. It says shall report annually. It doesn't say in what way, shape, or form, what manner you shall report, so I would imagine you would have some delegation abilities. If you feel like there's a report that already exists that covers all of those things, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, and you could act to submit an IG report as the annual report. I'm also looking in 235.04, which is the Department of Inspector General, just to see if there's any similar language related to an annual report. And I don't see any. So I would say the board could delegate that or use a report prepared by the IG as its annual report, as long as it's containing all the information that's specified in the code.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think one kind of addition that I think would be helpful and useful is for us as a board, if the IG's office is not able to do it, us as a board to point to those trends and patterns pieces, so that we can talk about any sort of trends that we're seeing or policy recommendations that we're making. You could supplement the IG report, annual report would be a recommendation that I'd want to put forth for us to consider.
I'd also say, it says it says report annually. I don't know whether that means calendar year annually, or, the board started hearing complaints as of July 11th of 2021. So maybe you go July to July, so it's a full year of work for the board, and then you file that report next July. Obviously, it takes some time to put together a report, so I think it's something probably like 2 months in advance, or at least 2 months in advance of when the report's due, that's when the planning should start on that.
Okay.
It would be very helpful to, okay, yeah, there we go. I think it would be helpful to have a summary of or some place where we would be able to annually review what it is that we have recommended. Those things just, have a tendency to get lost over the course of the year. And so if we had, we've made these 8 recommendations over the course of the calendar year, and so that we could track, what's happened with those recommendations, that would be useful.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. I don't know if that's a request that we have to put into the city, or, or if there's some additional resources that are required, the capacity to help staff and support that. And you talked a little bit about like a dashboard of some sort that folks can access publicly, make it publicly available. But I'd be interested. I don't know if the board wants to move on that and do that, or how we would make that happen, but I think that's a great recommendation.
I'm going to ask, are there members of the board, I would say at least 3, no more than 4, who'd be willing to be on an ad hoc committee regarding putting together the annual report, which I imagine would be taking the report from the IG and then adding supplemental information to it?
Well, I love volunteering for ad hoc committees or being assigned to them, so I'd be happy to participate in the development of that.
Amen.
Perfect. Who else would like to join Board Member Strickland? Oh, don't everybody run to it at once.
I know. No, we don't have to. Now, look, I'm gonna be clear. I'm not gonna create the database to,
Madam President,
do the
you know
report.
that those that are not here, it's usually when you get assigned
Yeah,
and stuff
exactly.
when you're not here.
Voluntold.
I like that. That's a good idea.
All right, so what I'll do is I will send an email. So
Yeah.
Board Member Younger is out of the country, and Board Member Jones is, Dr. Jones is at another
doc.
event, may be here. Dr. Ford has a family emergency, which is why he is not here. I would hate to volunteer him to do that. I'm imagining Board Member Fluharty is not going to be volunteering for this.
We'll see. We'll see.
So what I'll do is I will send an email out, Mr. Strickland, for the time being, since you're the only one who has volunteered, I will have you be the chair of that subcommittee, unless and until another board member volunteers.
And it'd be, especially to have the perspective of the esteemed chair, to be part of this effort, I think would be incredible. But we can talk offline about that as well.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, moving on to cases. We've actually got a few cases that are kind of 2 holdovers and then 1 that the entire board was asked to look at because it just missed getting assigned at the November meeting. So we'll start with those, and then the plan is to go Team 3, Team 1, Team 2. We may have, unless we get another board member who arrives today, we probably will have 1 case that we cannot move forward on because we do have a board member who is recusing for 1 case. So starting first with case number 2023-393.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
The recusal of one of the board members will not affect the ability to vote. You can still
Okay.
vote.
Even with
It's
only
only for-
having the 5 of us?
It's only for the quorum that it's important, but if
Perfect.
anybody has to recuse for a vote, you could still go forward with the vote.
Awesome. All right, sounds good. Okay, 2023-0393. I believe this was yours. Yep.
I'll read through it. One of the members had a question that he wasn't able to get out, I don't think, but we'll go through it and see what happens. On April 5th, 2023, the Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging police misconduct via the hotline. The complainant alleged on March 29th, 2023, 2 officers were rude by blaming him, the victim, for someone destroying his property and harassed him. Also, one of the officers stated the complainant was pissing him off. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera, computer-aided dispatch, unit history, and a statement from the complainant. The investigation revealed the officers responded and provided assistance to the complainant in accordance with Columbus Division of Police policy and procedures. The officers did not place blame on the complainant for his property being damaged. The investigation also revealed that at no time during the officers' interaction with the complainant did either of the responding officers make a statement the complainant was pissing him off. Therefore, it's recommended that the complaint be closed with the finding of unfounded for both allegations. And again, allegation 1 was the complainant alleges the officer was rude by stating the complainant was pissing him off. And allegation number 2, complainant alleges that the officers were rude by blaming the complainant, who is the victim, for someone destroying his property and harassed him. Conclusion. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that the officer stated to the complainant that he was pissing him off. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed with the finding of unfounded. And allegation number 2, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that the officers blamed the complainant for someone, the child's mother, destroying his property or harassing him. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed with the finding of unfounded. Unfortunately, our committee didn't come to a conclusion for this, but I think I'll say that I'll speak for them today, that we agree with the findings of the DIG, allegation 1, unfounded, and allegation 2, unfounded, for case number 23-0393.
So, question: was there a reason your committee did not come to a conclusion on this one?
Actually, I thought we had, and this was a while back, so I can't remember exactly. I thought we had, but Mark had a question that I think he was going to contact the investigator. Maybe he didn't get a chance to do that, so I don't know exactly what the question was.
So I wouldn't mind holding until the question could be answered. I don't know if that's going to cause issues or not.
I thought it was pretty straightforward, and that's why I'm kind of going with the idea. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So
This question?
No. The case here, the evidence.
Maybe.
Okay.
Do we know? Yeah, I mean, I just think generally if he's a question that he hasn't been able to ask and wants to ask it, I don't want to necessarily move ahead, even if it is straightforward, if you guys haven't concluded as a committee. Unless there's a concern about us not moving forward on that in particular.
Madam Chair, what my suggestion was, this complaint was closed July 19th of 2023. We're into December right now. The board won't be meeting again until January. My suggestion would be, unless there is a reason that you feel that there is some information that is not gathered in this report that you would need, which I would have said, in the beginning, we've always asked the committee when they meet to please, present any questions that you have regarding your, regarding a report. And at this time, we have not received any questions that the committee would have had regarding this report. So, my suggestion would be that we just move forward instead of continuously, keeping this complaint or investigation open.
And I just pulled up the worksheet, and it doesn't look like, at least the sheet the committee submitted says that they agreed there weren't any things missing from the report. They didn't think anybody else needed to be interviewed. I'm trying to find,
And that is correct. Initially, that was, I don't know what the question was down the road.
After the fact.
Yeah, after the fact, but initially it was that.
I mean, so generally, I understand the premise of, the investigation was closed in July. We want to move this along to CPD and kind of move this for the process. I guess the question I'd have is, we're still kind of waiting to hear about cases that were in 2022 that have been closed, that have been voted on by our board, that have been submitted to CPD. And so unless us holding this one back is going to create some additional backlog or bottleneck, I'm not too concerned about it, and I'm happy to wait for Board Member Fluharty's question. So that's my only idea. I'd hate to us move ahead with it without your review committee even coming to a conclusion of it. And then there was a question that he has that maybe is relevant after the fact. So that's my only reason that I would just hold on it. I don't think it's going to create some sort of backlog or some sort of issue.
and just to be clear, I don't see either from my notes that there was a question on it. I think what happened the first time we were supposed to review it is it was Board Member Fluharty's case, but he wasn't here. And so it didn't get recited. I don't have any notes that say there were outstanding questions on it. So I think it just might be he wasn't here the day that he would have read the case, and so it didn't get reported out.
But didn't you just say that he did have a question?
At our last meeting,
We didn't.
because I thought we were finished with it until he brought it to my attention. I thought we were done with it, but
Okay.
it's straightforward to me. I mean, it's easy breezy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree generally. I just think if the board member who said, I have a question, I want to bring it to the investigator, and then, I mean, I agree that that should have been sent to you all ahead of
If you
time.
didn't receive it.
Right, and you haven't
we're here at the
received.
meeting, it's on the floors.
Exactly, and so, but,
And not only that, he stated he was going to go down there in person.
He asked for an extension. This was 100.
To ask the question. Maybe he decided that he didn't have a question.
And Chair Burns, just to add to that, when this investigation was submitted to the board, it was already over time at 106 days. There was an extension allotted by the FOP. So if the question involves sending it back to the IG, it's likely that that extension is not going to be allotted
Yeah.
again. So just something to consider for this case specifically.
And it does seem that it's incumbent upon board members to file their questions in a timely way. We're talking about a case that was, you guys received in July, or when did you receive it initially?
I'm not even sure.
Well, as it stands, I would entertain a motion. So if we have a quorum here, so the amount of board members who are here can vote to move the case forward.
well, I mean, I think this goes to a process point, though, right? Why would we come back to this question? Or if there's a particular question, I guess I don't understand the concern of holding this case again.
So I think part of the concern is it's been sitting for a while, and no question has been forwarded to the IG's office that makes it, the things that we are supposed to do if we actually want to get more information, we haven't done. I am not even clear that we needed more information on this, just based on how many times it's popped up. I think it was just one of the ones that was missed. However, if it was something that we had a question on, then we are well beyond when we should have sent it to the IG for that question. Now, what I am willing to do, if the rest of the board would like to look at it between now and the end of the meeting today, I pulled it up, and I can't even remember any controversy related to it, and I haven't typed any, and I type almost verbatim what everyone says during our meetings, and I don't believe that there was an issue that needed addressing. I think it just got skipped.
Okay, and and he was at the last meeting, and just, it didn't come up?
No,
Okay.
and it was on the agenda from the previous meeting,
And
and
it just
also,
didn't- okay.
yeah, there's nothing.
That's fair.
Yeah, unlike 0441, which we'll get to next.
Yes.
We do have a discussion about that, and we at least know generally what outstanding questions were, and
Yeah.
hopefully folks have looked at the use of force. But I think 393 just got skipped.
Yeah, I mean, if folks want to move forward on it, I'm happy to do that. Again, I just think it goes to the point of like, we're just moving forward on it to move forward on it, to move things along, but the concern about timeliness and about backlog, I'm not concerned about, because we're still waiting to hear back about cases that have been submitted to CPD in 2022. And so, you know.
Well, and I'd also encourage you to take a look, because I think if there are questions about cases that have been submitted, the IG, the report, if you look, like I referenced, you can see how many, some of the recommendations we've made. I think we are hoping to get reports back on, you know, how many things have actually been changed or recommended. So
I mean,
I'd like
but-
us to just be clear about that, though. So instead of saying, well, there's this huge number of cases we don't know
No, I mean,
about yet, I'd like to at least be a little more precise with.
We have specifically asked, I think, at every meeting for the last 6 meetings or so, about getting answers on these cases. But I'm happy to move on, but I'm just confused as to, we brought this up on multiple occasions, and we have not gotten a whole lot of answers.
So would you like to ask the IG a question now about
Well,
specifically what data do you want back?
well, I would say this is specifically for CPD and the public safety director, that we did ask the questions, that it's, at some point, I believe, we've made a request for the police chief to come in to talk about questions. I mean, am I misremembering that? I feel like we've made that request a few times.
We did, and certainly, I would like that too, but that's kind of out of our hands. I mean, I can't force her to come in and see.
And I was not here. I had COVID the meeting that the public safety director was here. Did you all not have an opportunity to ask questions then? Or what were the answers to the questions that were posed to the director of public safety at that meeting?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just say I'm really confused. What I will say is some of the questions that have been asked at the meeting have been, what is the disposition of some of the sustained recommendations that we have made? And I have stated before, there's a process. So a lot of the reports have went through the chain of command. As the board approves the reports, they go through the chain of command. The report, I did report out, and I can find that information and add additional as to some of the reports that where sustained conduct was there. Now, whether disciplinary action has taken place, there's still a process for that. And the chief of police, you know, she's still guided by whatever policies and procedures. She's also guided by the collective bargaining agreement as to whether or not those will take effect. But that's also a process. So it's not that the information has not been unavailable as to not reporting. The process has not been completed yet. But I will be meeting with the chief this week, and so one of the things that I have stated is as the recommendations have been done and recommending disciplinary actions, if that has occurred, I will be reporting back out to the board on that. But if I don't have anything to report because the process has not taken place, that's the reason why there has been no report. It's still a process.
And that's helpful, and I think, and you know, certainly understanding that there's a whole process that it will go through. Each complaint that goes through us and then goes to the CPD, and then they've got to go through the process of investigation if they need to do that, an additional process there. I guess where I'm at is, as a board, for the entirety of our time on the board, as board members, speaking for board members, not on the IG, speaking for myself, is we've been making these recommendations for cases. We've sent it along to CPD, and we're just kind of rolling through our process, trying to get as many cases done as possible. You know, at a certain point, you know, there isn't even an opportunity for us to kind of course correct or level set about, okay, well, is this even being heard, or what is happening from here? I personally don't know what happens next. And so if I don't know what happens next, then, and I'm a board member that pays some attention, how is the public going to be, how are they going to know what has happened with all these cases that we're reading off and moving forward? And that's a question that I think goes beyond just the Inspector General's office, and I think one of our charges as a board is to, you know, measure impact in some way. And I don't, you know, I know there's a process, but even things that have happened in 2022, and you know, we want to be specific, maybe we can be specific about it, but surely there have been a few cases that have been completed and finalized, and then whether or not disciplinary action has taken place, yes or no, that's kind of what I would like to see for the board. I mean, I think that's part of our charge.
All right, I have asked Stephanie if she will reach out to the CPD again. And I cannot promise that what they'll be able to tell us as far as what the results for all of our recommendations have been. However, I would like to do something with case number 393. So, do you want to table it, Mac, or would you like to move forward or make a motion?
Yeah, I made that motion, so let's vote and see how that goes.
Do we have a second? Second. Okay. Any other questions or discussions on 393? All in favor of accepting the recommendation of the IG, please raise your hand. All right, motion carries. Turning next to 2022-0441. This case had been kicked a couple of times, primarily because there was an outstanding question. It looks like the notes from the first meeting where we discussed it, Board Member Strickland, you asked if there was an after action on case number 0441 regarding use of force with a pregnant woman and a minor child. And the board was then sent the use of force policy to review. And then at this point, it is now up to whether the subcommittee would like to make any other, I'm assuming, make any other recommendation in light of the 4 findings. The findings that were listed, just to remind folks, were 2 findings of exonerated, 2 findings of unfounded. However, the board was concerned, or at least the subcommittee was concerned, that maybe there should be a difference in policy on use of force with a pregnant person and minor.
Yeah, to that specific question, I think we had was whether or not there was an after-action report completed on this case, and I don't know if we got an exact. I'm not sure what the answer to that specific question was.
I think the answer to that was no. And the question was, do we, in light of what the policy is, do we want to make a recommendation that it should not be that, or that it should be changed or modified.
I do believe that it should be looked at, because when you look at the totality of this case, to me, there was a whole lot of discrepancies in the way in which the police operated in this. Number one, they did not even take time to even talk to the manager at first to see if, in particular, if they did hold this particular woman, whether she was the one that he saw in the store. They just grabbed her and put her in handcuffs and put her in the back of the police cruiser. And I don't think that they didn't even take time to even look at her stature to see if she was pregnant or not. So I did take exception to that. So I do think that there should be something either added to or at least reviewed when it comes to that particular policy.
And I think also the issue was the 12-year-old son was put in the back of the police car, so he was also detained despite the fact that
There was never mentioned of a second person
he
being
wasn't.
involved.
Yeah, there was no suspect that was a child.
And I don't know if there's been further, other than, I know we got the link that said, this is the use of force policy, but I don't know in terms of, I think another question that was there was, this, again, back to our example, this is a case from 2022, October of 2022, and so the initial question was around whether or not the Department of Inspector General's office has been in contact with them since and then I think that's where Kelly asked also about like a notification letter. What's the notification letter that folks get and folks receive? But I don't know if folks have, anybody outside of our committee has further questions about this particular case? Or if folks maybe need more time to review the use of force policy or what the recommendation would be?
I looked at the policy, but I still don't think that the policy is fair the way that it is set, because it still does not address the issue. The issue is, in my mind, there should be some kind of a policy change in reference to how we handle pregnant women. Because this really could have escalated, because if you remember the case, when the father came up, when the husband came there, he was highly irate because of the way his wife had been treated, more so than the son. So I think that there really should be some type of a review on this policy as to how we handle these types of situations.
Got it. I don't know, Kelly, if you want anything to add. I know specifically here, we just said we had concern with the incident, disagree with the recommendation, and specifically around the respect to allegation 3, around the 12-year-old son, and then to the point that Pastor Tatum just spoke to, was thinking about how they handle somebody who's pregnant.
And I remember, and it's starting to come back to my memory now, there was another case where we had an individual that was carrying a machine gun down the road, and they stopped. He had a permit for the weapon, or he had, but the fact is they did not put him in handcuffs when they were waiting on him. They went ahead and let him lean up against the side of a car. So, I just want to know, is there one way we handle this for one person, and there's another way we handle this for other? And this particular person that was carrying this weapon, but he was white. And this pregnant woman, she was black.
And just for clarity, I think we found out afterwards that she was not pregnant, but the issue did pop up because of the initial, either she was suspected to be pregnant and or believed or said she was pregnant. Notwithstanding that, I think the issue of both there not being something specific about use of force when a person is pregnant, and or also the enforcement of, the detaining of a 12-year-old who's not a suspect at any point. So does the committee have either a recommendation for policy review policy change?
Yeah, I think certainly policy review / change. I mean, I don't necessarily know the specifics, even looking at that use of force. I think I don't know if there's additional nuance to it in terms of situational, so that's something the Department Inspector General's office has more, or the city attorney's office has more clarification on in terms of, use of force policy. You've got among different people or different circumstances. So I just wanted to get a sense of if you all had additional perspective to add on use of force policy, or if that's something we could direct to the safety director as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe the law, specifically state law, has some outlining requirements when you're confining, restraining women that are pregnant. The ORC does go through that, but again, I would need to look at the specific facts of this case to see if the facts of this case fall in line with that. So you would need to, I can't answer that today, but I'm happy to look at that and report back to the board. Rob and I can do that together on that.
I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head. You might be a good person to
Yeah,
talk with.
we'll get together on our end and be able to report out so you know exactly what there is surrounding, what protections there are surrounding pregnant women and what requirements of law enforcement there are under the law specifically.
Okay.
And then if it is a requirement under the law, then the directives would require that the officer abide by
Great.
the law.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. And correct me if I'm wrong, there is not a separate youth police engagement policy currently for CPD.
I am not aware of
I
one.
don't believe there is, but just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right. So would we like to then table this until we can hear back from the city attorney?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect.
I will say, I just looked on my phone, Ohio Revised Code, section 2901.10, restraining or confining pregnant women. So there's revised code language related to that.
And just so I'm clear, was she pregnant or not?
I
think there's
somewhere
an
in the complaint
email.
it said it, and then we got an email later that said she was not pregnant. So I'm just, what happened there?
So just reviewing the report, and this is the information looking at, is the statement was made by the husband when he arrived at the scene. At the time of the incident, when the complainant was detained, there was no acknowledgement of the complainant to the officer that she was pregnant. So if there's no acknowledgement, and depending on, and I'm not able to really see because I didn't pull the body camera to have that discussion. If the complainant appearance is not so that she appears pregnant, the officer is not going to know. And so, again, in this report, we went based on, there was body cam that was reviewed, there was a statement that was made by the officer, there also was information in here when the officers talked to the complainant along with detaining the child. And I believe all of the information, and I'm just kind of going based on what I remember in reviewing this case, the officer acknowledged that he did not know the age of the child based on how the child appeared. And him detaining, the same thing when it came to the detaining the complainant. She matched a description. I don't believe at the time where the incident occurred that the officer was even aware that the complainant was pregnant or there was any acknowledgement. So an officer is not going to be able to take any specific action if they're not aware or they're not told. And I think in this case, there's nothing in here, there's no statements in here that we acknowledge that the officer was told by the complainant at the time that the complainant was detained, that he was advised that she was pregnant. That was something that occurred after the fact when the husband arrived at the scene. And we don't even know at that state how pregnant she was, and I'm just saying, because she could have been pregnant, but maybe not showing. So I think all of these are things that we need to consider when we're, if we're going to hold the report up again, I think it's always good to be able to recommend a policy change or a review of a policy, but I also feel that, reading the report and looking at the facts that are stated in the report also helps to be able to paint the picture of the incident that occurred and the facts that was available, not just to the officer, but also to our office in reviewing the information and the body cam at that time.
Yeah, thank you. And I think part of that, unclear about whether or not the officer knew was pregnant, that seems to be, that didn't necessarily come into even the analysis as to, right? Because what you just described is kind of helpful perspective as to why they may pursue a situation differently. But I don't recall that in the analysis itself on the memo as to why that didn't come up. And maybe it wasn't relevant, and now I'm hearing that she wasn't pregnant or something. Is that confirmed? So there's two parts. So one is whether or not she was pregnant and how we followed up to get that information. And then two is specifically the facts of this case, though, did point to that the alleged suspect matched the description of the woman in this case, but there was no reference that a suspect was a child or a male child or a male generally. And so arresting or handcuffing the child, even though the officer may have not perceived the child to be a child, they handcuffed this child that seemed to pose no specific threat in this situation. So that part is what also rose to the level of concern there. But yeah, I would love some clarity on the point around maybe somebody was later in contact with the complainant to find out that answer, because I just saw it like in an email. It said she wasn't pregnant.
If I may say, it's just a few things about this particular case that just sticks in my craw. I consider myself to be a very logical individual. And in reading this case right here, to me, it just stinks. Because first of all, the lady gives them the guy a description of the girl running towards Turkey Hill. And then all of a sudden, this lady and her children are walking towards Turkey Hill, and this officer pulls up and grabs her. She's not running. She's walking with her family. So it's something that just sticks in my craw about this particular case, that just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't jive with me. It's just a few things that just don't jive with me about this particular case, regardless of policy or not. Common sense, something's not right with this. And that's just what I have to say about this.
I remember the case, I don't remember the specifics. And so my question would be, when the officer approached her and he went to handcuff her.
First he grabbed her.
Okay, so he grabbed her and cuffed her. Did she comply and?
It doesn't say whether she did or she didn't.
Okay. Because I was trying to imagine what level, how much force was used.
Well, I don't think there was a great amount of force. She
okay.
complied with them.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But, the overall emphasis for me is, why would you pick this woman, with her children, when the description was a woman broke the glass out from the inside the store, trying to steal cigarettes, and she runs towards Turkey Hill.
And I'm in agreement with you. However, there are many times when officers are sent out on runs that are stated one way, but when they get there, it's totally different. And I'll read you one here in a minute that happened in this case. But, so I get what you're saying, but I also can see it from the other side, because sometimes you're on a run and it's totally different from what you receive from the dispatcher.
So One of the points here was, one of the allegations was that the complainant alleged racial profiling. This was unfounded, was the Department Inspector General. I think just in general, when we think about categorization of complaints, and this is helpful in terms of the Department of Inspector General's report out, is just how we think about how certain complaints are categorized, right, with different allegations. There's use of force, part of an aspect, allegation of racial profiling, another aspect. In this instance, I think one of the questions that I was specifically asked, and I just want some clarity on, was, since this happened back in October of 2022, was there any sort of contact with the complainant since this time?
So the only contact the investigator would have with the complainant is once the case has been finalized. Usually we notify the complainant that the case has been closed and it would, go before the board. So the complainant has not contacted us to, see what the disciplinary action is or what the finding is. They would still be probably waiting for whatever the decision the board has made. So no, the only contact would have been, I think this case was closed in January 20th, 2023. So that would have been the contact that we would have had with the complainant.
Okay, and then we did get this email about the complainant not being pregnant. How did we get that? Who got that information? How did we get that information?
I would have to check on that. I believe you would have gotten that probably from our supervisor, so I would just have to check. Matter of fact, I can let me look and see if I can bring up the case notes to see. Maybe that might help me be able to see the last time that if we contacted the complainant.
So we're going to table
Yeah.
0441 for the time being. When we come back, if we could have any additional answers on the outstanding questions, but also if the subcommittee can, after you've had a chance to go back and look at the use of force, I imagine that a recommendation is going to be coming. So if you could
Yeah.
draft what that would be, whether it is both related to pregnant folks who are in question, but also, and this has been a repeated recommendation to CPD, is having a youth police policy, which does not exist. And that recommendation was made a few years back. So,
And just for clarity's sake, there is a very general, it's a little light on directives, but there's a handling of juveniles directive that is 3.04. I don't know that it covers everything that you would be concerned about with regard to engagement with juveniles, but that can be a good starting reference point for you in drafting any recommendations to CPD.
that would be great if maybe, Stephanie, we could get a copy of that sent to the whole board, but in particular, subcommittee two. Also, keep in mind that part of the issue, and I think we highlighted this the first time we talked about this case, is that general members of the public and law enforcement in particular tend to view young black boys as being 4.5 to 4.6 years older than what they actually are, which is why a youth and policing policy and one that intersects with race is probably a good idea to have. And I know right now that doesn't exist. All right. Any further questions on 0441 before we turn to the case that all the board members were asked to look at, because it did not get dumped to a specific committee? Okay. All right. I will read the summary of case number 22-0018. This case involved a complaint where there was an allegation that Columbus Police failed to make an arrest and file a police report. The complainant stated that she was held captive in her apartment by multiple people and yelled to her neighbors, hoping that someone would contact CPD. She claims that instead of arresting her assailants, officers reported the incident as a medical call and did not include that individuals were inside her residence. It turns out during the course of the investigation, It's believed that the complainant hit her head, may have lost consciousness for a period of time. She believed that there were three assailants in her home, three strangers in her home. However, law enforcement officers, upon their investigation, found that her door was locked. They did not find three individuals in her home. And this prompted a discussion around a potential mental health crisis or issue. So the IG was able to find that the call for assistance was labeled as a 1016 disturbance. Dispatcher informed the officers that it was a possible 16B, which is a mental disturbance, which prompts a medic unit also being dispatched to the location. Officers arrived and evaluated the incident and determined that there was not an arrest, that arrest wasn't warranted for the incident. BWC footage shows no individuals located inside the complainant's home when officers arrived. Also, again, that her door was locked prior to arrival. Officer contacted emergency medical service to assist the complainant regarding the incident before leaving her home. The investigation found no evidence that the alleged incident occurred, found evidence that the alleged incidents happened. However, they were supported by Columbus Division of Police policies, procedures, and/or law. Therefore, the allegation is exonerated. Does anyone have any questions or discussions about that case? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of exonerated in case number 2022-0018.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Any other questions? All in favor of accepting, please raise your hand. Any abstentions or any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, turning it over to Team 3 for the cases that were assigned last month.
I'll start with 22-0589. On December 20th, 22, Columbus Department of the Inspector General received a complaint from the complainant alleging misconduct. The complainant alleged that a CPD officer responded to her call for domestic violence on December 16th of 22 and did nothing. She alleged that he asked her, "What do you want us to do?" which she believed was rude. The Columbus DIG reviewed the body-worn camera for the officers, the computer-aided dispatch data, and the police report, and concluded that the officers' actions were within Columbus Division of Police Policy and Procedures. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends a finding of unfounded for allegation number 1 and exonerated for allegation number 2. Columbus DIG reviewed the BWC of the officers and the CAD data, the police report, and concluded that the officers' actions were within CPD policies and procedures. So again, the allegation number 1, unfounded, exonerated for allegation number 2. Basically what happened was the officers were called on a domestic violence call. I think it was at a store, CVS. The officers arrived, spoke with the complainant. They also spoke with the cashier. The cashier had heard some yelling. She came out from the back of the store and found that the complainant was yelling at the security officer, who was in fact her ex-boyfriend. Not married, no children, and did not live together. So that doesn't amount to a domestic violence. She asked the complainant, the CVS cashier asked the complainant to leave. She didn't. She said if she didn't leave, she would have the security officer escort her out. So this is the ex-boyfriend escorting her out. So the officers come there, speak with her, get the information, and they weren't saying, according to the investigator, what do you want us to do to be smart? They were simply asking what she wanted them to do because they could only, at that point, take a report, which they did immediately after the incident. The officer, I think he also gave her or offered to give her his card and the prosecutor's information. And that's what happens with an assault. Report taken, you refer him to the prosecutor's office with that suspect's information. And then they can go down later and file charges with the prosecutor's office. So the officers did what they were supposed to do. They followed policy and procedures. So I motion that we agree with the findings of the DIG for unfounded for allegation number 1 and exonerated for allegation number 2. Case number 22-0589.
Okay, and is that your motion, Board Member McIntosh?
Yes.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Is there discussion or something?
Any discussion on it?
Yeah, I just, was there any concerns or comments that your review committee had regarding this case?
None whatsoever.
Got it.
Okay, we'll withhold voting until we've gotten through all of Team T's.
23-0590. On May 8th, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging misconduct by a Columbus police officer. The complainant alleged that the police officer bullied her, was rude, and antagonized her over having her bright lights on when she only had one of her headlights was working. The Columbus DIG conducted an investigation into the complainant's allegation. The investigation found no evidence to corroborate the complainant's allegation against the officer. Therefore, it's recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed unfounded. Based on the information and statements, the Columbus DIG found no evidence to substantiate the allegation. Also, the Columbus DIG concludes if the officer's action had occurred, it would not have violated any CPD policies or procedures or laws. Therefore, it's recommended the allegation against the officer be closed with the finding of unfounded. There was no BWC. He didn't activate it because he was still inside his cruiser. In his statement, the officer said he didn't exactly remember that specific case, but that he sometimes stops vehicles with equipment violations to just give them a warning about that violation. This person wasn't given a citation. So, like I said, he doesn't remember this case specifically, but it may have been a case where he was simply giving her a warning. One of her headlights was out, so she decided to use her bright lights. She figured that having her bright lights on would be better than having driving with just one headlight. So I motion that we agree with the findings of the IG and that it be closed, that the allegation be closed with the finding of unfounded. Case number 23-0590.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any questions?
What is the policy? Are they supposed to, in that instance, turn on their body worn camera?
From the way I read it, the way I understood it, I don't even think he got out of his cruiser, so I don't I don't know if they have to activate it while they're in their cruiser.
Do we have,
Isn't it automatic now when they get out of the cruises? Isn't it set up to be automatic or something now that it comes on? Because we had so many of them that we're not turning them on.
That I'm not sure.
Is it set up that way now?
is there reference to, just in terms of language that was used there, in terms of, it said he couldn't recall, but maybe it was a different situation? Did the investigator say, and therefore,
The investigator interviewed the officer regarding the complaint. The officer stated he could not recall the incident involving the complaint. During the interview, the officer shared that while on patrol, he sometimes uses his discretion to provide a warning and advise citizens that their vehicle tags have expired and that they need to get them renewed or their light is out and they need to get it fixed. The officer does deeds such as these out of his willingness to help people. The officer also stated this incident involving the complainant could have been one of those times where he just advised the complainant to get their headlight fixed.
and then did they say, and that's not a policy violation? Or like, what was the follow-up there to the specifics? It says that he did not activate the body-worn camera, or was there any reference to the body-worn
Nope,
camera?
yeah,
There was just no reference to it?
no reference except that he did not activate his camera because he was driving.
Okay. Do we have any, I don't know, is that within policy?
I guess.
Is there?
I'm imagining because he was still in his cruiser.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I just want to, I mean, is that within policy?
And I don't think either that, because that wasn't the complaint specifically, but I'll let the IG.
Based on the investigation, if the officer, if he did not activate his lights and sirens to do a traffic stop, and maybe he just pulled the person over to advise them, then no, it wasn't a traffic stop, so he may not have had to activate his body cam. I would have to look a little bit more specifically into exactly the body cam to see what happened on this. I think in this case, the complaint was regarding her being pulled over, and she thought the officer was rude for advising her that her headlights her bright lights were on. And the officer was basically stating he didn't recall because he didn't issue a ticket. So he may not have had his lights and sirens on, which would have required him, based on CPD policy, to activate his body cam because he was having an interaction with the person. But if he just pulled up to have give her some advice, I don't believe that the officer would have been violating policy and procedure if he's just doing maybe I want to say, I'm probably wrong with saying the terminology, so I won't say the terminology.
I think it's just an encounter, like
Thank you, an encounter. I started to say
Yeah.
investigative, but it's not, but it's just an encounter in which they can just briefly have a conversation with someone that does not amount to the fact that he's taking action.
Okay. I think I wouldn't be comfortable moving forward on this without kind of getting a exact kind of sense of what the policy is in this instance. I mean, are we 100% on that in terms of and it's just an encounter, there's no need?
There are instances where a self-initiated encounter will require activation of BWC.
Yeah, so I think I wouldn't want to move forward on this.
So I do have information. So the complainant and the officer were both in their vehicles driving, and the officer just pulled up alongside the complainant and just was advising her. He did not get out of his vehicle.
So it wasn't a traffic stop even?
No, it was not
They were
traffic.
both, I'm assuming motions and says, hey,
Right.
your brights are on, and she's like, my traffic, like, yeah. So that's not a traffic stop.
But does that, I mean, that's, to me, still sounds like a potential encounter.
If the encounter is self-initiated and the officer is in their vehicle, I believe the directive just says prior to exiting the vehicle, the officer shall activate BWC. So it doesn't require officer to, during the entire time while driving the vehicle, have the BWC activated, but if they are going to execute a self-initiated response prior to exiting the vehicle, BWC should be activated.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the only concern here is that, I mean, there was a complaint filed, and so I just was trying to get a sense, and it seems like in this situation, he didn't file, or he didn't issue a ticket or anything like that.
Or even conduct a stop, because that's a distinction that's important. Like, he didn't pull her over, he literally just pulled up next to her and
Yeah.
said your brights are on.
And so could you just remind me, the allegation was that he was rude because she said the brights?
Bullied, was rude and antagonized her over using her bright lights.
Okay. So the only concern I have is that, I think generally, yeah, if you just saying, hey, just giving you a warning, you might, that's not gonna work. You gotta, that's one thing. I do wonder what you do in situations where you don't have any sort of evidence of that encounter. And, it's unfounded here in terms of there's no evidence to show that, what the complaint is alleging occurred. And so, but without having any sort of footage, we don't know one way or the other what would happen. And so that's my only concern, is that because there's not footage of that particular encounter. Now, again, it seems that it's not necessarily a policy because of the exiting, you have to exit the vehicle for that interaction but that might be something worth considering. I don't know. I'm just saying that might.
It sounds that even if everything she alleges is the case, there's no violation of policy. So even without even assuming that the officer, did tell her to put on her brights, she
No,
was
she
offended.
probably wanted to take her
She had
brights
them on
off.
get them off. I meant that the officer challenged her use of the brights, is what I meant to say. There was no violation of policy. Even no amount of evidence, even if this had been recorded and her statements were substantiated, that he told her she could not do this, she took offense at that.
I think the reference was that she alleged that she was bullied. Was that the allegation?
Yeah, she didn't expound on that.
Yeah,
I
she
don't-
didn't.
I don't,
Yeah,
yeah, I
what
don't
does
know what
that
that means.
The encounter seems so. Well, I don't want to characterize it.
Well,
I mean, that was I don't know, the investigation when they interviewed the complainant to get more information, the complainant didn't expound on what bullying meant here in this instance?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that we should all understand is that complainants make allegations all the time. And they are going to describe in their words what they feel occurred. What we look at is, if you're going to say that the officer bullied or rude or antagonized you, you're going to have to give a description as to why you felt that. And in this case, the complainant felt that way simply because the officer questioned her about her bright lights. But there would not have been any violation for an officer stopping someone to give them some advice or to tell them that the lights that you have are either improper or you need to do that. So based on the information, there really, again, this is unfounded because there was not enough information to be able to substantiate what the complainant's allegation is. And in fact, even if the officer had stopped and advised her, the officer had discretion as to whether or not to issue this person a ticket, because it is a violation for them to have their bright lights on. They're supposed to, it's a equipment violation.
And that's helpful. I think the question that I had is there was reference, there was a claim that the person made an allegation that she was bullied. And so I did want to get some clarity. The follow-up to that is, what examples do you mean by you were bullied? What do you mean by that? Am I hearing correctly that the response is only that the officer told me to turn off my brights, or was there were there other statements that were made? That would be helpful to know within this broader context. I agree ultimately that at the end of the day, if there is not evidence available, then this situation is unfounded. But I would want some clarity on, what the complainant was referring to, or even what the allegations were made, even if you don't have the evidence to support that. I think that would just be useful context.
If you look at the report, on the report, let's see, I'm looking at, on this one was an early report, so we didn't number the pages, unfortunately. But on the second report, up under analysis and finding, it states the complainant reported to the Columbus DIG on May the 6th, 2023, that such and such bullied her, was rude and antagonizing her by repeatedly saying he could pull her over for having her bright lights on. The complainant had her bright lights on, and because only one of her normal headlights was working, and she felt having two lights on was better than one.
Oh.
That was the statement that was provided regarding why she felt the officer bullied, was rude, and antagonized her over that, what he said to her.
Okay, so this is helpful. So I didn't see this case because it was a different review committee. So I haven't been able to review the specifics of it, but I am looking at it now. So the evidence here of who they've interviewed was just the officer. There was no interviewing of the complainant, at least in this particular case. So at least what it is presented here. And so if there was not an interview of the complainant, I don't think we should necessarily move forward on this because I think it would just be basic practice to try to get more information, just like we just asked about, of, what did you mean by that? Even if ultimately the evidence may not support it, I think interviewing a complainant would be helpful in this case.
And I would agree, except I think she's saying
That's right.
what it is. She's saying because the officer,
I think it's best practice that you interview the complainant.
She gave her interview when she made her statement. They didn't force the statement. She made the statement.
And I don't imagine they felt they were missing anything in addition to what she had stated.
right, she repeatedly saying he could pull her over for her having her bright lights on. That was her complaint. That the officer repeatedly told her,
She was.
I can
The
pull you
complainant
over
was
for having.
interviewed.
The complainant was interviewed?
The complainant was interviewed.
It just wasn't presented here? Or am I looking at the right one? It says evidence and it doesn't have the, does that seem?
So right now, what we have, at least on here, is we have a motion, we have a second to accept this as given. There's no policy violation in the BWC camera not being turned on for this. I can't even call it a traffic stop because it was a encounter. Yeah, and just a drive up next to you and say something, right?
Yes.
And so we've got the subcommittee agreeing with this recommendation. It looks like we have the complainant interviewed. I'd like to call, at least, unless there are new questions, to be able to hold this to vote with the rest of the cases that Subcommittee 3 has.
Well, one of the questions is, so the complainant was interviewed, but it just wasn't indicated here?
Yes, and that was, that would be our fault. It should have been, but we pulled up our case notes, and and we do try to make it a point that they should have footnoted the additional interview, because all of our cases, when we get all of the complaints we receive are always followed up with an interview to the complainant, because we need to make sure that the complaint that they file is accurate, also any additional information. And it's also for the investigator to introduce themselves to the complainant so that the complainant knows that if they have any additional questions, who to contact.
Okay.
Yes, so it's not in the report. That would be, mistake on our part for not adding that in.
Excellent. So, yeah, the only thing I would just add is to just, if we can include that with the addendum or whatever. But other than that, that's helpful. I just wanted to get a sense. I agree, ultimately, there's no additional, you don't have evidence to substantiate, but I just wanted to make sure that the complainant was interviewed. So that's helpful. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
I did motion, right?
Yep, we have a motion and a second.
Case number 23-0713. On June 2nd, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging police misconduct. The complainant alleged the officer would not provide her with a police report that would allow.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Board Member McIntosh, you said 2023-0713? Or
Okay.
07?
0713.
Okay, I have a different number, so
Okay.
I see a 65.
I do have a 65.
But I don't see the 0713 listed here as your cases on the agenda.
Well, he's got it. I can see right here.
Now, I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's not listed on the agenda.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Let's see, the complainant alleged the officer would not provide her with a report that would allow her to purchase her mother's stolen ring from a pawn shop. Also, the officer would not listen to her trying to explain the situation in regards to the pawn shop.
We've had this case before.
Yeah.
Good?
It was closed last month.
Yes. Yeah, that was subcommittee 1.
I don't know how we got it, but
So, is there a way for us to, I know we talked about not everybody having all the cases, but like, is there a way for us to, whether it's a folder or something, that we can have access to all of the cases so that, because I think it would be helpful when different subcommittees are reading out the cases, it's kind of hard to keep track. And so maybe that's something, we're assigned our specific set, but we have access to all the cases. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
how about this one? 23-0765. Okay. On June 12th, 2023, the Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct. The complainant alleged that Columbus police officers knocked on the complainant's doors and windows after requesting to remain anonymous to dispatch. The Columbus DIG completed a review of the evidence, which consisted of a request to the ECC to gather call history, computer-aided dispatch data, unit history, shot spotter alert information, and report. A review of body-worn camera footage, interview of the officers, and finally, a review of CPD policies and procedures. The Columbus DIG recommends the allegation against 2 of the officers be closed, sustained, as the officers were advised by dispatch that the complainant did not want to be contacted, and both officers attempted to make contact with the complainant at his residence. In addition, on the BWC footage, the dispatcher can be heard advising officers that the complainant can hear them outside and is not coming to the door. But these 2 officers continued knocking on the doors and windows of the complainant's residence. The Columbus DIG recommends the allegations against the other responding officers be closed unfounded, as these officers did not attempt to make contact with the complainant. So the conclusion, allegation one. The investigation found evidence that the alleged incidents happened. The incidents and/or actions are supported by CPD policies, procedures, and/or laws. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation for two of the officers be sustained. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that other officers knocked on the complainant's doors and windows after requesting to remain anonymous to dispatch. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded, and that's for the remainder of those officers. So, our committee agreed with that finding, and I motion that we as a board agree with the findings of the IG, the finding of sustained for two of the officers in case number 23-0765, and we also recommend that the investigation be forwarded to the Chief of Police, Columbus Division of Police, for review and possible disciplinary action in accordance with CPD policies and procedures, the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Columbus and the Fraternal Order of Police, Capital City Lodge Number 9.
Okay, we have a motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? All right.
Twenty-three 0799. On June 16, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging police misconduct, excessive use of force by Columbus police officers. The complainant alleged that Columbus Division of Police officers busted into her daughter's house looking for her husband. The complainant stated that the mother was not present and the officers used force on her grandchildren. Specifically, it is alleged the officer dragged her grandson across the floor covered in broken glass, and two officers stole money from her daughter's home. It should be noted the complainant was not present when CPD officers raided her daughter's house. The complainant stated she was provided this information by her daughter and her grandchildren. The investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera, computer-aided dispatch, event chronology report, and the unit history report, property slips for evidence seized, interviews with the complainant, daughter of complainant, granddaughter and grandson of the complainant, and the focus officer. The investigation found no evidence that supported the complainant's allegations that the grandson was dragged across the floor covered in broken glass, or that CPD officer stole money from her daughter's home. The officer seized money from the daughter's home and vouchered the money as evidence it was not stolen. The officer's actions were in accordance with the CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that both allegations be closed as unfounded. Conclusion, allegation one, the complainant alleged that CPD officers dragged her grandson across the floor that was covered in broken glass. Based on the information and evidence obtained and reviewed, Columbus DIG recommends the allegation against that detective be closed with a finding of unfounded, as there is no evidence or injuries found on the victim's body to substantiate this allegation. While the officer did slide the grandson across the floor and then stood him up against the refrigerator, no broken glass was observed on the floor by the BWC or the officer. Also, the officer's actions were within CPD policies and procedures. Allegation number two, the complainant alleged that CPD officer stole money from her daughter's home in the amount of $1,030. Based on the information and evidence obtained and reviewed, the Columbus DIG recommends that the allegation against a CPD officer be closed with a finding of unfounded. The money was seized as evidence and properly vouchered. The officer did not violate any CPD policy regarding the collection of items taken during the execution of the search warrant. The officer provided the complainant with a property sheet with every item recorded that was seized from the home. Our subcommittee agreed, and it's my motion that we as a board agree with the findings, the finding of the IG as unfounded in case number 23-0799.
May I have a second? Any questions or discussion?
Certainly. Yeah.
Sir?
Just clarification as to why they were dragged, the son was dragged.
And I can, let me find that real quick for you. I thought I had it highlighted. And by the way, okay. The grandchild is an adult, a 6-foot-tall, 230-pound adult. The officer stated that in this particular case, the young man that he zip cuffed is 6 foot tall, weighs approximately 230 pounds. He had him lie down on the kitchen floor where he cuffed him. He stated the young man was positioned on the floor near the basement entrance from the kitchen, and they needed to move him out of the way in order for the team serving the warrant to be able to clear and secure the basement. He advised that he slid the victim on the floor maybe 2 to 3 feet and stood him up and placed him against the refrigerator. The officer stated he did not recall hearing the victim say he was hurt, and he did not observe any blood or injuries on the victim. He also stated the victim never asked for medical attention, and as a precautionary measure, trained medics with the intact unit were on scene to assist with any injuries that may occur. Also, that officer provided Columbus DIG with a copy of photographs of the victim, which did not show any evidence of injuries.
So that's helpful clarification. So the officer made those statements and provided photographs. Was there body-worn camera footage here in this situation?
Yeah.
So is so then the body-worn camera footage substantiated that? I mean, because the phrasing was that the officer stated he moved the grandchild 2 to 3 feet. He slid.
Mm-hmm.
And the body-worn camera footage substantiated that statement?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just one, okay.
Yep.
And was there a reason that he was dragged as opposed to him moving out of the way? Like,
He was already cuffed.
He was already cuffed and lying on the floor.
Okay. Was there an altercation? I'm just confused.
It sounds like a warrant.
It was yeah.
They came in pretty quickly, I'm assuming.
From intact.
Okay. And he needed to be cuffed in this situation?
Absolutely. When you
Well, I'm just saying I don't.
when you coming into a house like, I mean, you're just not tippy-toeing in. This is, yeah.
Well, I was just
cuffed.
trying to get a sense. So basically, they come in, and everybody's getting cuffed in this situation.
Were there arrests made after? I'm assuming there were arrests made
And
in relation because they seized the cash.
I don't know for sure about that.
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Okay.
Seizure of that amount of money sounds like there were arrests made in association with the warrant and the.
Because I think they were probably looking for the boyfriend or the husband, and I don't think he was there.
If this was intact, busting, it was a drug house. If this was a
Yeah.
drug house and arrests were made, the ears report should show who all was arrested pursuant to the bus. So
Yeah.
it's probably a document that the IG has and reviewed as part of the investigation. Do you want to know whether or not individuals are actually arrested or?
That wasn't my question.
Okay.
I think that was.
It wasn't a question. I was trying to explain, because that's what I assumed had
Got
happened.
it.
There was a drug warrant, bust into the house, where typically what happens is they subdue everyone who's in there while they're looking for.
Correct.
The person, the assumption being often that if there are large amounts of drugs and money, there are probably also weapons in the house. And so it is
Preserve
pretty
the scene.
common for each person who's on the scene at the time to be
And what time,
cuffed while there.
and at what time did this occur?
I don't see a time.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Would that have made a difference?
I'd be curious to know in terms of when this was issued, what time of day or evening.
You can provide that information if you would like afterwards. That's probably not going to make a difference as to record what the findings of the cases, but we can probably provide that to you.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I generally would just, as we think about all other considerations tied to this particular instance. So the photographs were provided to the investigator. A clarification, I'm assuming here the complainant was interviewed as well?
Complainant, homeowner, grandkids,
Okay.
and the focus officer.
And then the body-worn camera footage also showed that there was no injuries?
It showed there was no glass.
Yeah, no glass.
And it did not substantiate what the complainant was alleging. And keep in mind that the complainant was not at the scene. The complainant was only filing a complaint based on some information that they received from the grandkids. And the grandkids were interviewed in relations to this complaint.
Okay, helpful.
Thank you.
All right. 23-1101. On August 17th of 2023, the Columbus Police Internal Affairs Bureau transferred IAB case IAB case 202-306-1001 to the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General for administrative investigation of a LEADS violation, Law Enforcement Automated Data System, by a sworn officer of the agency. On May 15th, 2023, the officer was reported to have accessed the LEADS database for a non-law enforcement purpose in violation of LEADS security policy and protocol. Specifically, the officer accessed the LEADS database to conduct a registration check on a license plate number registered to a member of his immediate family. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of the IAB case, records support and LEADS correspondence, CPD internal email correspondence, and an in-person interview of the involved officer. The investigation found the officer was in violation of the LEADS security policy provisions, as his access of the database was not conducted for a law enforcement purpose. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officer be closed as sustained based on the evidence and his admission of accessing the database. Conclusion. The complainant reported that the officer violated LEADS security policy by accessing the LEADS database for non-law enforcement purpose. The officer admitted he called LEADS to conduct a license registration check on a license plate number registered to his wife. Based on the information obtained, the Columbus DIG recommends the allegation against the officer be closed with a finding of sustained. The investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. The officer's use of the LEADS database was not conducted for the purpose relative to the administration of justice as outlined in the Leeds Manual on Security Policy and outside of the scope for what is defined as administration of criminal justice, as listed in ORC 4501 2-10-01. Definitions in the Leeds CJIS resource database. The officer's improper use of the Leeds database was in violation of Division Rule of Conduct 1.03, violation of rules or division directives, subsection A, which states in part, division personnel shall not commit or omit acts in violation of the explicit or implicit purpose of the rules of conduct, policies, directives, or orders of the division as it pertains to subsection 1. Law enforcement databases listed in section 2, policy statements of Directive 10.01, division computer systems, which states in part, data access through any law enforcement database shall be restricted to the use of duly authorized law enforcement and/or criminal agencies for the purpose of criminal justice duties. So our subcommittee agreed with the findings of sustained by the IG in case number 23-1101, and I motion that our board also agree with the findings of the IG and also recommend that the investigation report be forwarded to the Chief of Police, Columbus Division of Police, for review and possible disciplinary action in accordance with CPD policies and procedures, and the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Columbus and Fraternal Order of Police, Capital City Lodge Number 9.
May I have a second? Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, so the officer admitted to doing this, and then when presented with that's a violation of, what did they say?
You know what? I wasn't so concerned about that, and I don't remember, but let me see if I can, let me see if I can, let me tell you the officer stated his reason for conducting the license plate registration check was for a law enforcement reason and a non-law enforcement purpose. The officer stated that the license plate he checked was registered to his wife and was displayed on a vehicle that he owned. The officer stated the vehicle was in a repair shop and he was unaware if the license plates were valid or not.
Yeah.
More?
No.
Okay.
May I just ask, why is this case here rather than going through just channels within the police? Why was this forwarded to the IG? I'm just not clear about that.
Well, there are quite a few cases that that IAB does refer to, maybe because IAB does not want to do the investigation, or perhaps they don't want the investigation to go through the chain of command. So we have the ability to conduct those investigations. So when we are forwarded those investigations, we do conduct them. And again, once we're done, they're forwarded.
Is that because they don't have the resources to conduct, or that
It looks like
a
there's-
case is politically sensitive? I mean, I just,
Looks like there was also an IAB.
it's just a weird, yeah.
The incident started as a citizen complaint. The citizen reported it to IAB, and so IAB forwarded it to the IG because the IG's jurisdiction is for citizen complaints.
I mean,
A citizen knew that this database had been accessed by the police? A police officer? And they got that information?
this is how.
Look at that complaint.
Is it from his wife?
No.
Oh, I see.
That's, yeah.
To me, that sounds like a little bit of I mean, that still feels like, I don't know why that's not also an internal affairs investigation. Is there a particular reason in that instance?
Well, I don't know that that changes.
Doesn't change
No,
what
but
we-
it- no,
what
it's-
we do.
it's a fair-
Why we're involved in this process and
taking a Department of Inspector General time and effort to do something that seems like a clear chain of command.
And if I remember correctly, the Instagram case was also one that IAB had that came to us as well. If everybody remembers that from several months ago, the Instagram that had a lot of the racist.
Yes.
and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
the-
yeah.
So that one had a similar path to us
But this-
too.
That was but there was I think in this instance, though, the complaint,
is a citizen. And there are times that, I mean, this is one scenario, but we had a similar case, I don't know if the board recalls, where there was a complaint that came in that was a citizen complaint that the CPD initially ended up investigating it. I'll have to recall it, but when CPD had almost finished, they realized the complaint that came from, I believe it was the one that came from the fire department, is still considered a citizen complaint. And so CPD initially started investigating it because it came from it came from the fire department, one of their officers, but it was determined, and IAB determined that it, coming from outside, is still considered a citizen complaint. It ended up coming to us, and it was a report that I believe went before the board, and that's why, because anything that comes outside as a citizen complaint, we have jurisdiction to conduct that investigation, and so that's why a lot of times those investigations do get forwarded to us, and we conduct it.
and I understand that in the context of if it's a different department, but if there is a citizen who also is a, it seems to me, works in CPD, and files a complaint against another officer, my understanding that jurisdiction is IAB and not the Department of Inspector General. And so, but if that's not the case, I mean.
Right. So from what I understand, IAB conducted the criminal investigation part on this, but the citizen and the administrative investigation was sent to us for us to be able to conduct it, because we don't conduct criminal investigations. Our investigations are administrative only.
And even still, though, my understanding was that we don't, even civil, we're not, that's not our jurisdiction among officers, or is it, is that?
Is it an officer or is it a non-sworn employee of
Non-sworn.
CPD?
Okay, so is that the different distinction? Okay. So I guess that's the distinction.
'23 1132. On August 7th, 2023, the Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct. The initial complaint came from the complainant's husband, who was not originally on scene. The husband stated two police officers sexually assaulted the complainant. The Columbus DIG then spoke with the complainant, and she alleged that while detained, the complainant feels the pat-down she received was excessive, with the officers going around her body 3 times, and each time he went around her body, he patted her breast, went around her waist, went around her butt, and went around her groin area. After an interview of the complainant, a review of BWC, a review of documentation provided by the ECC, and a review of Columbus Police policy and procedures, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. The complainant alleged that while detained, she feels the pat-down she received was excessive, with the officer going around her body 3 times, and each time he went around her body, he patted her breast, went around her waist, went around her butt, and went around her groin area. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Our committee agreed, if you need further, I'll read on.
Yeah, would like further.
Okay.
What evidence did
The-
they find?
Okay. Okay. The Columbus DIG did an ECC request to obtain computer-aided dispatch information. The CAD shows the call was for a burglary in progress. The CAD shows the description of the suspect as being a black female in a light-colored knee-length dress with hair pulled back tight. BWC of the incident was viewed by the Columbus DIG and shows that the complainant does fit the description from the CAD. BWC shows the officer stopped the complainant as she's walking down the road and explaining to her that she looks like the suspect that police are looking for and that she is going to be detained. The officer then places the complainant in handcuffs and conducts a standard pat-down. The officer at no point pats on the complainant's breast and at no point goes around the complainant's body 3 times. The pat-down appeared professional in nature, was conducted swiftly and in compliance with CPD policy and procedure. That's what the BWC showed. Our committee agreed with the finding of unfounded, and it's my motion that we, the board, agree with the finding of the DIG of unfounded in case number 23-1132.
How did this encounter?
Can I ask for a second first? Can I have a second, please? Thank you. All right, now discussion?
How did the encounter end exactly? Like, how did this end?
Don't know. That was it. Pat down.
I'm assuming, was the complainant interviewed? Okay.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
But we don't know how it ended. I was just trying to get a sense of as
Did she-
Do you mean if she was
Arrested?
arrested?
or just, yeah, I mean, just the notion, it's like there was a pat down and then, there's been a complaint filed. It didn't seem clear how that altercation or alleged altercation or encounter ended, or, or if that's relevant or not. I don't know. It just seems
Yeah.
it ends there and then there's a complaint filed. And so I don't know if there's other allegations or that was all that was alleged.
In my mind, I figured she wasn't arrested, but I don't know. It doesn't say specifically. But it certainly addresses the complaint.
Yeah. Okay.
You have one more?
Yep.
Board Member McIntosh?
Yep. (2023-1270). On August 29, 2023, the Columbus Department of the Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct via the hotline. The complainant explained she was in a vehicle accident on an earlier date. After everyone involved in the vehicle accident exchanged information, the officer advised everyone they were free to leave. The complainant alleged when she requested the incident number and/or a report number, the officer told the complainant he did not have to do a report. Upon leaving the scene, the complainant alleged she overheard the officer advising one of the parties the report would be available on the following Monday. The complainant alleged when the at-fault driver opened his door, the odor of marijuana was so strong it could be detected by the complainant from 4 cars up. The complainant alleged the police officer did not complete a sobriety test on the driver at fault, and she believed 1 should have been done. The Columbus DIG completed a review of the evidence, which consisted of a request to the Emergency Communications Center to gather call history, computer-aided dispatch data, and unit history, a review of the body-worn camera for the focus officer, interviewing the complainant, and a review of police policies and procedures. The investigation revealed the officer was within policy and not required to file a report for a collision with no injuries. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed as exonerated. As it pertains to the allegation that the officer did not complete a sobriety or field test of the at-fault driver, the investigation found no indication that the officer should have done a sobriety test on the at-fault driver. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed as exonerated. Conclusion for allegation number 1, the complainant alleged when she was requested the incident number and/or report number, the officer told the complainant he did not have to do a report. However, upon leaving, the complainant stated she overheard the officer advising one of the parties the report would be available on the following Monday. The Columbus DIG completed a request for traffic collision reports from the Columbus Division of Police, Internal Affairs Bureau. The investigation revealed no report was filed by the officer for this incident. The investigation revealed the officer was within policy and not required to file a report for a collision with no injuries. Therefore, it's recommended the allegation be closed as exonerated, as the officer was not required to complete an accident report due to there being no injuries. Allegation number 2, the complainant alleged the officer did not complete a sobriety test on the at-fault driver. The complainant explained when the at-fault driver opened his car door, the odor of marijuana was so strong it could be detected by the complainant from 4 cars up. A review of the BWC for the officer found all of the steps required upon reviewing police policy and procedures were completed, and the officer made no indication that he felt the driver to be impaired. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed as exonerated, as the officer did not do a field sobriety test, but was within policy not to do so. So our review committee agreed with the findings of the IG for exonerated for allegation number 1 and exonerated for allegation number 2. Oh, I'm sorry. And so my motion is that we as the board move to accept the findings of the IG in case number 23-1270.
May I have a second? Second. Thank you. Any questions? All right, pending before us, we have case number 22-0589, 23-0590, 23-0765, 23-0799, 23-1101, 23-1132, and 23-1270. All in favor of accepting each of those that they've been put forward, please raise your hands.
Was there one that was, we need to get more information on the break or something? Or was that?
No, it was one that we had already done before that was being getting
Okay.
ready to be read.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so calling the vote, did you vote, Board Member Strickland, on those?
I'm trying to get clear. There was one where it was this back and forth question about, was that 441?
That's not in this
I feel like there was
batch.
another one about.
That's the one we're holding on.
That was our case.
We went through.
Where Mark had the question.
Huh. Yeah, thank you. There was another, I feel like we were just going, there was a case that we were going back and forth with, and we were going to get information at the break, and it was separate. Which one was that? About whether the complainant was interviewed and they were interviewed? Okay,
Yeah, that wasn't, I don't think you were holding up for that.
got it, okay. Cool.
All right, are you in favor on all of those? Yes, are you yeses? Okay. All right, any opposition or abstentions on any of those case numbers? No, all right. We will take a 12-minute break, come back at 4:10, where we will resume with Team 1.
This is case number 2023.
3-0968. Complainant was in a dispute with a neighbor. The complainant was very agitated. When CPD arrived, the CPD attempted to de-escalate. The complainant would not calm down. He was yelling, shouting, cursing at the officer. He tried to listen into a phone call to the officers, between the officer and the officer's supervisor. The officer lightly pushed the complainant back to his apartment, and the complainant alleged that this push was misconduct. The body-worn camera, as well as other evidence, indicated that it was a very light tap, and the DIG found, with respect to the allegation that the push was a violation of CPD policy, that the officer ought to be exonerated. We agreed. And the complainant also alleged that the officer did not file a report on this incident. The officer, in fact, did file a report, and so with respect to allegation 2, the DIG found that the officer should be exonerated. The subcommittee concurred with the DIG's findings of exoneration with respect to both allegations, and so I move to accept the DIG's findings in case number 2023-0968.
Do I have a second? Second. Any questions?
This is 2023-1043. This involved a traffic stop of the complainant due to the complainant riding his bicycle close to the center lane stripe. The complainant alleged that it was not unlawful due to the road conditions and that the stop was unlawful. The road conditions were found to be, there was no road conditions forcing the complainant to ride near the center lane stripe, and so the DIG found with respect to this allegation that it was unfounded. Secondly, the complainant further alleged racial profiling of his companion who was riding next to him. His companion riding partner was black. There was no evidence of profiling, and so with respect to allegation 2, the DIG concluded that that allegation was unfounded. Our subcommittee agreed with the DIG's findings of unfounded with respect to both allegations, and so I move to accept the DIG's findings of unfounded in case number 2023-1043.
Is there a second? Second. Any questions?
Yes.
What were the investigative tools used in this particular case to come to this conclusion?
The investigative tools involved a review of body-worn camera, cruiser video system, computer-aided dispatch, unit history information, and interview statements from the complainant and the involved officer.
Thank you.
Case number 2023-1105. The events took place outside of a Columbus Crew game. Some fans of the opposing team lit a fire and burned the Columbus Crew flag. In addition, they began taking Columbus Crew merchandise off of fans and burning that as well. CPD officers attempted to have the fans disperse and put out the fire. 3 fans refused, repeated orders. The CPD officer then warned them that if they did not disperse, that mace would be used. The CPD sergeant used chemical spray mace to disperse the crowd. There was an allegation of misconduct for using the spray, and that the officers did not warn them. The DIG finding was that there was a repeated warning and that the use of mace was within CPD policy and procedure. As a result of that, the allegation of misconduct was concluded to be unfounded. We agree with the DIG's finding of unfounded with respect to case number 2023-1105, so I move to accept the DIG's finding.
Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I think just generally trying to get a sense of the policy here, and in this instance, I think the mention here was the fact that there was multiple warnings given means that it kind of enabled this to occur, but I was just trying to get a sense of whether or not it was necessary to use at all, and because I know there's been, several instances around this particular issue. So I just want to get a sense of what the policy is. Does anybody have clarity on the policy of when they can or cannot?
It's mace. We're talking about mace.
The mace,
Yeah, I mean, I can send you, I pulled up the policy. I can send the policy to you. It's a CPD policy. It does state here, if chemical spray is used, it shall be directed at the person participating in the violent contact, not at the group in general. It does state that a warning shall be given, and based on the information that we were able to review, we found that the officer's conduct was in support of CPD policy and the fact of using the chemical spray.
And was there an after-action report or, update on this in terms of, does something happen? Is there kind of a follow-up, just more detail or information about?
So what I do know is CPD does conduct after-action reports. Those usually tend to be when there is a major event. That can be something that if the board wants to follow up with the chief, they can. They're not done on every incident that occurs. Something major, I believe the action report, when the board was first aware of it, was during the Amber Alert, in which they, come together and have a meeting and kind of discuss what occurred. But that doesn't happen on every incident.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted for clarification, either how many, was one person or what was the,
Let's
kind of
see.
the number of folks?
Says that he used the the report simply says that, according to the use of force report, he used the chemical spray. He told the Club America fans to stop burning things, to leave the property now. Other officers were also issuing loud commands: Columbus police move out, Columbus police leave now. These three fans did not comply with the commands, and it says deployed the chemical spray at the men. So it was more than one.
Okay, and then is there something about it shouldn't be at the person, but nearby?
He observed lighting items on fire, yeah.
Okay, and then as far as deploying the spray,
It just
What's
says
the
it should
policy?
be directed at the persons or participants in the violent conduct,
directed at,
meaning you don't want to make if you're going to use the chemical spray, it should be at the person that you intend for the spray to be to affect.
got it. And then just for clarification, I know the city or,
So it was directed at the three men who were lighting things on fire.
Got it. And then I know the city kind of issued some, I don't know if it's policy or statements around the use of, and I know there were several legal decisions. So I don't know what the state of use of, what has the update been? What have the change, because I know there have been changes to that policy. And so I was just wondering what those changes were and what is different now than previously.
And what you may be speaking of, and just let me know if you're getting clarification, is when there are large
Yes.
gatherings. So I know there is an updated policy out there. I just don't have that readily available to me, but I can send that to you. That's totally separate. It's not a revision of a policy here, but it does speak directly towards if there is a,
Using a chemical agent for crowd dispersal.
yeah, for crowd, there is when it talks about if it's more of a protest, but I can send that to the board if you want to look specifically at that. I just don't have that readily available.
Okay. And just in terms of the continuum, the use of force continuum here, that was deemed, the necessary level?
Yeah. There is a directive a regulation regarding use of chemical spray, but I accepted we accepted the DIG's finding that this was within the directive. We didn't.
Is it different? Yeah, I think it's different if it's a crowd than if it's 3 people in this situation.
I've just made a note also to Ms. Brock to see if we can get Mr. Furby in to give us an update on Fourth, Fifth Amendment, but also use of force, since we've had a couple of questions about use of force and any policy updates or case law updates. Would that help if he were able to give us kind of an overview of, here's what the laws currently say
Yes.
about whether it's pepper spray, but not just that, also kind of the issues with the warrants and handcuffs and things like that.
Yeah, that'd be tremendously helpful. That would be
That,
great.
that would be great. I know our team just had training with Furby, so it was really good training. I mean, we had 8 hours, so
That's great.
The relevant directive is 2.04. It was revised pursuant to the litigation that occurred after the protests for George Floyd in June of 2023. So that is the most current directive that you have, and that is directive that speaks to using a chemical agent for the purpose of crowd dispersal and the
so-
prohibition to do that.
And then this is, would the definition here be purpose of crowd dispersal, or is this another reason that,
Probably fact dependent.
okay, and yeah, because I'm just trying to get a sense of that, of if it changes based on, for purpose of, they're lighting fires and, there's a different level of ability to be able to use that in that circumstance as opposed to like a protest generally.
Well, and I think that,
Yeah.
to me, it feels like that falls within the line of, that's an individual.
It's a use of force.
Use of
Yeah,
force.
exactly.
In response to the use of force continuum. Because if
Yes.
somebody's doing a violent action.
Correct.
And it's
Or a criminal
game,
act.
right, like that's not a, that's
Correct.
different than First
Protest.
Amendment rights and
Yeah, First
protests.
Amendment protest.
So if you're looking at 204-4A, it will say verbatim, sworn personnel encountering a group of people, which 3 persons might be considered a group, some of whom are engaged in unlawful conduct, so if they are lighting fires pursuant, and that's a criminal act pursuant to the code, shall be guided by the use of force directive when determining whether to use chemical spray.
Okay.
That's exactly what Chair Burns just said.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay. I was just trying to figure out in situations, because I know there's a lot about not trying to figure out other ways to disperse, not utilizing chemical.
Correct. So you're talking about a largely peaceful crowd versus a group of individuals who are engaging in unlawful activity.
Got it.
Was there a motion and a second?
Yes.
Okay, I don't remember. Okay, so I'm on case 2023-1175. The complainant was holding his girlfriend hostage at knife point in a locked room. During the incident, when CPD arrived, the complainant's mother had a seizure. Medics were called to care for the mother. CPD then kicked in the locked door, de-escalated the situation, handcuffed the complainant, and told him he needed to get into the cruiser. He repeatedly refused. He thrashed around in the back seat of the cruiser. The allegation was that he was thrown into the cruiser, causing minor lacerations on his face against the bars. A body-worn camera and other evidence found that the officers used the appropriate level of force to get him buckled into the back seat. As a result, the allegation that the officers allegedly threw him into the cruiser once he was in custody, causing him to fall and hit his face on the bars and caused a minor laceration the DIG's conclusion was that was unfounded. Our subcommittee agreed, so I move in case number 2023-1175 to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded in this case.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks. Any questions?
Okay, this is 2023-1193. The incident involved a stolen car. The complainant was apprehended. During a search, the CPD believed that the complainant was hiding drugs in his pants. The complainant refused to take this package out of his pants. He refused, so he was strip searched by CPD. The complainant alleged that CPD inserted their fingers in his rectum. There was no evidence of that. The strip search did find drugs. DIG concluded that the allegation that he was during the authorized strip search that the officer placed his fingers inside the complainant's rectum was unfounded, and our subcommittee accepted the DIG's finding of unfounded in case 2023-1193, so we move to accept that finding.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes. Was there body-worn camera footage in this instance?
There was not, because per CPD policy, no body-worn camera footage is recorded during a strip search.
Well, in terms of the lead-up to the incident.
Prior to this, let's see, lead up. All I see is that the officers and witnesses were interviewed. I don't see body-worn camera footage because it was focused upon the actual act of how the officers conducted themselves during the strip search.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Was there body-worn camera footage reviewed prior to the
Search.
Prior to the search?
I'm looking at the notes. I believe there was body cam footage up to the incident, but there is no body cam footage of the strip search.
Yeah,
because
no,
that-
I'm just trying to get a sense of up to the search, what the interaction
There was.
showed. Okay, and was it necessary to do a strip search here in this instance? Like, I mean, are we talking about?
So in this case, the officers asked the complainant to reach into his own pants and take out what
Yeah.
apparently was some sort of a package or,
Yeah.
and he refused.
And then, so what's the process here?
Reasonable,
Yeah,
articulable suspicion.
Yeah, that they noted, that they saw something. What was the allegation here that,
They believed he had a package of drugs in his pants. So
and
that-
it was a reasonable, articulable,
I mean, that's a legal determination that,
Correct. And
The
if
IG
it's a
not-
search, it's going to be probable cause, not
Yeah.
reasonable suspicion.
okay, so there was probable.
But again, even then,
in
that's,
this-
that's going to be a legal determination, but
Okay.
is a determination that the investigator can make pursuant to what facts are available to the officer at the time.
And did we have, probable cause in this situation?
well,
or-
I think that's the legal determination.
Yeah,
part.
I
Like-
think we determined that we would stay away from those questions, didn't we? Or in a prior
Yeah, like,
but I've seen, is anybody going to pursue that? I guess that's the question. And if that's not within the purview, I think, again, as an example of complainants, if there's a complaint and, this is the purview of what the Department Inspector General reviewed, but if they have other, if there are other avenues that they certainly can feel free to pursue those through different avenues. But I think that's a question that I just had generally in terms of, was it necessary to do a strip search in this instance, and what steps does it take to get there?
Well, I think that is the heart of the Fourth Amendment question, that he may very well have
Yeah,
a claim in his
precisely.
case that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated, but that is what we've specifically said is outside the scope of what the IG should be looking at.
If the complainant feels that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated, that's a different avenue per se.
I think that's what we had determined at a prior board meeting. If I recall, it was, there
Civil
was
rights
a-
violation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, and I think, like, I'm not generally, I think it would be, if somebody, let's say somebody alleges, and the allegation was not here that they're, I don't know if they made an allegation that their Fourth Amendment rights were violated.
Well, just that it was
Right.
an intrusive.
Yeah, so, you know, I do think referencing that, even if you're not able to make a determination on that, I do think that specific reference might be useful. As previously we've mentioned in other cases where it's like somebody alleged their civil rights were violated, and that is another entity or agency responsible for, you know, investigating that, but that is outside the purview of the Department of Inspector General.
I think we actually directed the Inspector General's office, that's what I was trying to say,
Yeah.
Kyle, that I think we had previously said we did not want the Inspector General to make those kinds of determinations, that we felt it was outside the scope of their responsibilities, that, because before, I think they had the counter
Yeah.
situation where they said this was not a violation, and we said, you know, we really don't want you guys deciding one way or the other, but leaving it up to the complainant to file a civil rights action if they thought that that was appropriate. We just, yeah, so the question, we just need to give clear guidance to the Inspector General if we're going to change what we previously
Well,
directed them
I
to
think
do.
Mr. Tobias is the one that was advising us on this, and he said those are issues that we don't want to get into.
Correct.
Those are issues that we don't, because the person has the right, if they feel like they've been violated, to go before that particular entity.
Who's going to tell, who's going to tell somebody that?
But that's what we talked about.
Well, I know, but I mean, what's our, if as a review board, there are certain
Well, to
things
tell
within this-
somebody about other entities and to try to dictate that is two different things.
Yeah, no,
I would just caution, the board and the IG are not the lawyer for the complainant in terms of providing legal advice to them. They can provide information, but as Tiara said, it's very fact-specific and situation-specific. They interview every complainant, and if during the course of that discussion, something about violating civil rights comes up, then yeah, they can provide go talk to a private attorney to discuss what your rights are, but that's not something that the DIG or the board should be getting involved with. The duties and responsibilities of the board is violations of policy.
And I'm going to try to answer your question, but
Yeah.
I anticipate maybe we should table this and come back. All of the directives that CPD have they follow from Fourth Amendment protections for individuals. So when there's a directive that says you cannot conduct a traffic stop unless you have reasonable suspicion that a crime is afoot or that a traffic violation has occurred, that is grounded in the Fourth Amendment protection. So it's not necessarily that we're not making determinations about probable cause, but we are doing that pursuant to specific directives that have been laid out before CPD. And so if there is a directive specific to when an officer should be conducting a strip search per se, right, then we can provide that to you and we can determine whether or not this officer should have or could have had the ability to conduct that strip search without saying this.
Yeah, when we're, yeah.
Correct.
That,
Without making a legal determination per se.
that is what, do we have that? Is that in this? Because I think that is relevant to this particular situation.
We did not ask for the specific, they cited the code, but didn't it's Directive 311, body cavity and strip searches, but our subcommittee didn't ask for a copy of that particular directive.
I mean, that's just the question that comes to mind. I was wondering in terms of if, why that was perceived to be necessary in this situation. And so,
I mean, I think that, which is there probable cause to conduct a search, is the legal issue that the IG is not supposed to get into. The second question of, was the way the search was conducted a violation of policy, is the thing that we are allowed to
Yes.
to work through. So I think that question you're getting at is exactly the part that is not for us. That is that legal determination of, was the action that occurred prior to the search sufficient to support probable cause determination by the officer conducting the search?
so I mean,
Which is why I think
both-
having Mr. Furby come in and talk is helpful, because I think it can fill in those gaps of, well, what's the current law on Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment? But that is us having that particular determination of, was probable cause justified, I think exceeds the scope of
No,
what we are
I agree
authorized
with
to
that.
do.
I agree with that piece. But what I'm asking in this instance is probable, whatever justified the officer believed justification for the search, then the question about policy as to the strip search. I mean, like that is it seems like an extra level, but I don't know. I mean, so I'm just trying to get some clarity on that in terms of whether or not.
We were assuming probable cause because we were avoiding that question, and then but we did not examine, if you're asking, did you examine the policy and see if the officer's behavior conformed to the policy, or are you asking about the policy itself and whether the policy is a legitimate policy?
No, I mean, in this instance, whether it conformed, like if they're, like I don't know the policy, so I don't know in terms of, okay, this situation requires a strip search in this instance versus some other way to find this.
But that's what was investigated by the IG, and the committee reviewed it and found merit in their review and in their conclusion. So I just feel like the conversation's a little circular now, and I'm just kind of confused as to what it is specifically that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm specifically asking the difference between a search versus a strip search.
Right, and that's dictated by the policy, which they reviewed in relation to the specific facts and circumstances of this case, and found there was no violation of policy.
I can read you.
Yeah, I'm just
Let me
like
read
why
you a
you,
paragraph
yes,
from the
that'd
report.
be helpful.
This is probably will be helpful as
Yeah.
to the committee that read the report. So it says, an interview was conducted of the focus officer who confirmed that he was working such and such a day. The officer, oh, wait a minute, I want to go
Yeah.
to, okay, so when they pulled the vehicle over, they apprehended the vehicle. The officers noticed a large bulge, which they believed to be narcotics. The officer explained that they requested to the complainant to give up the narcotics, but the complainant refused multiple requests. Due to the complainant's refusal, a strip search ensued, which was authorized by the sergeant at the scene. The complainant was briefed on what a strip search
Okay.
entailed. And the officer that confirmed that this strip search was a strip search and not a cavity search. And the officer confirmed that when conducting the search, so we can stop
Yeah.
on that part. The
Yeah.
other part was, they did recover something, but the allegation was that during the search, the officer inserted his fingers into and so that was what the complainant was. So the investigation looked at the fact of, was the search that was done, was it within policy and procedure? Because had that act actually occurred, where the officer did
Yep.
insert that action, that would have been a violation
Yep.
of policy. That would not have been a strip search. That would have been a,
Body cam.
right,
Yeah.
that I believe, there's another policy and procedure as to who is able to do that. I don't believe officers are. I think that's more of a medical profession. So anyway, hopefully that answers your questions as to, based on the interview, the information we obtained and reviewed as to why we felt that the actions that occurred by the officer was not a violation of policy.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, I think the understanding that there was a sergeant on scene, that they confirmed that it was a strip search in this situation, but not a cavity search, that they felt it was, and I guess the question is they felt that was necessary versus a full strip search versus, so I don't know those specifics there, but that answers the questions that I had for this case.
This is 2023-1251. This involved a traffic stop. The complainant was driving left of the center lane at a high rate of speed to get around a slow-moving vehicle. And there were two officers on bike patrol. One of the officers drew her weapon when the individual was slow to stop. She was concerned that he would hit another officer who was on bike patrol, who was in front of his car, who was also trying to get him to stop. Her drawing her weapon was within CPD guidelines, and so DIG found, with respect to allegation 1, that the officer drew, this officer drew her gun, and that was a violation of CPD policy. The DIG exonerated him regarding allegation, her regarding allegation 1. The individual was put in a paddy wagon. DIG found that was also within guidelines and was not a violation of CPD policy. So with respect to allegation 2, the officer was again exonerated. His car was impounded, and he alleged that was unlawful, but that was in addition within guidelines since he was arrested. And so with respect to allegation 3 of the impounding of his car being unlawful, the officer was exonerated. And concerning allegation 4, that he was stopped because the officers didn't like the sound of his car, there was no evidence to support the fact that the officer stopped him because they didn't like the sound of his car. So with respect to allegation 4, DIG found, concluded that allegation was unfounded. So I move with respect to case 2023-1251 to accept DIG's findings of exoneration concerning allegation 1, exoneration concerning allegation 2, exoneration concerning allegation 3, and unfounded regarding allegation 4.
Is there a second? Okay, any questions?
This is case 2023-1331. The complainant alleged that his girlfriend's vehicle was improperly towed from in front of a house. The CPD got a report of an abandoned vehicle. All 4 tires on the vehicle were deflated. The vehicle was there for a week. With the car being inoperable, it met the standards of, quote, a junk vehicle, end quote, and therefore it was appropriate for CPD to call for a tow. And so DIG concluded, with respect to the allegation that the tow was an unreasonable tow, that was unfounded. The subcommittee agreed, so I move in case number 2023-1331 to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded with respect to the complainant's allegation.
Any questions?
This is case 2023-1430. The complainant alleged that the officer improperly had her gun drawn when the complainant came to work at 4 a.m. The facts in this case were that the officer received a report of a burglary in progress at a Dollar General store. The report was that the individuals looked like, quote, crackheads. The officer responded to the report. She drew her gun but didn't aim it at anyone. She explained to a group of individuals who were standing outside the store why she was there. She determined that they were a cleaning crew. The officer then holstered her weapon. The DIG found, with respect to the allegation that she had her gun drawn unlawfully when she came to her business, that her drawing of the gun was within CPD guidelines, and so they concluded that the officer ought to be exonerated. Our subcommittee concurred with DIG's findings of exoneration, and so I moved in case 2023-1430 to accept the DIG's finding of exoneration with respect to this case.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions?
In this instance, who made that reference in the report about?
The crackhead?
Yeah.
It was somebody who reported the incident. It wasn't an officer.
Okay.
So somebody called in.
Is that kind of when somebody just calls something in and says something?
She was responding to a burglary in progress. The caller stated it was simply a call in, that the caller stated that there was a burglary and these people look like crackheads. So she responded to that. And when she arrived, the alleged suspects were dressed sloppy. Their appearance appeared to be that of someone who could have been involved in a burglary. As she approached, she saw no signage on the truck that was parked in front of the store, so she kept her gun out, not pointed at anyone. After a few questions, she was able to determine that it was a cleaning crew and that it was the manager of the store sitting in her parked car right in front of the door of the entrance. She made her introduction, asked specifically about burglary in progress, and explained to one of the men why she had her gun out. She determined that everyone was safe and holstered her gun.
Is there, so basically because the call was a call for burglary in progress, the officer arrived at the scene with the gun out? Is that kind of standard?
Yes.
Okay. And so understandable within that broader context, the concern is when somebody makes a call like that, and if it's, how is that balanced in terms of when something is dispatched, somebody makes a call about a burglary in process, Like I know there's some other situations where somebody can make a call, it's a mistake, it's a mistaken situation there. So is there a...
That example that he gave was excellent in that she determined
Just some,
that they were the cleaning crew. So she took time to address who they were, but at the same time, she had her weapon out in case.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we have open motions on case number 23-0968, case number 23-1043, case number 23-1105, case number 23-1175, case number 23-1193, case number 23-1251, case number 23-1331, and case number 23-1430. All in favor of accepting those motions as given, please raise your hands or say aye. All right, we have no opposition on any of those. All right, so we have the next 8 minutes to get through as many cases as Team 2 is able.
We can table, we're not going to be able to get through them in time. I can quickly get to a few that there were just no questions on, and run through them, but then we'll jump to the, we're not gonna be able to get through them.
No, I did not anticipate you would get through all of them, but I figure
How much time do you, a couple minutes?
you have 8 minutes.
7 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. 6 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like get a couple of these rolling. I mean, I just,
Are there any that your committee agreed with the recommendations?
yeah.
Okay. I mean, if
I
I
mean,
were
that's
you,
what I was hoping I could just rattle them off, and running through the summaries. But we've talked about everybody wants the full summary, and I will do 1353.
Okay.
On September 8th, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department Inspector General alleging misconduct by CPD. Complaint stems from the arrest of the complainant while he was in custody for felony strangulation. The complaint alleges that on August 30th, 2023, he was arrested and the officer in question choked him and slammed him in the back of the police unit while he was handcuffed. Goes in, the investigation consisted of a body-worn camera footage, focus officer interview, witness officer interview, complainant interview, use of force report, and a review of CPD directives. The investigation found that the officer in question was not in violation of any policy or procedure, and that the allegation did not occur. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation be closed as unfounded. There's no evidence that the officer choked and slammed the complainant while the complainant was handcuffed in the police unit. And so our review committee would move forward on this allegation of unfounded for case number 1353.
Okay. Any seconds? Any questions?
Great. The next is case number, no, I messed this up. Case number 992. This is 922, thank you. The complaint alleged that she called the police for a, quote, gun situation on July 3rd, 2023, and the officers did not take the person to jail, but told her to, quote, take it in her own hands. After the review of the body-worn camera footage and interviews of the officers, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation that the officers told the complainant to, quote, take it into her own hands when dealing, end quote, when dealing with her neighbor who waved a gun at her and her family. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officer be closed unfounded. As it pertains to the allegation that the complainant stated that she contacted the police about a, quote, gun situation, the officers did not take the person to jail. The investigation confirmed this allegation. However, it was supported by CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it's recommended that this allegation be closed, exonerated. Our committee agreed with the findings of the Department of Inspector General in case number 922.
And is that your motion?
That is our motion. That is our motion.
Thanks. Any questions? Okay.
This is the last one. The complaint alleges that on July 2023, officers were in his neighborhood and were shining lights and pointing guns inside of his home. The complainant said he went outside of his home to determine what was going on. Officers continued to point lights and guns at his face and were rude to him. He said the officers at the license looked at his license plates on his vehicle, and one officer told him that they'd be seeing him. The review of the investigation did not find any evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that the officers were shining lights and pointing guns inside the complainant's home and continued to point lights at his face and guns when he stepped outside the porch. So allegation one, be closed with a finding of unfounded. The investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant allegations that an officer was rude by telling him to shut the F up and go in the house. Therefore, that allegation, too, is closed with a finding of unfound. Also, the investigation revealed that a responding officer did look at the complainant's license plate number and said to the complainant, quote, "It's good to know who you are now," end quote, after the complainant informed the officer he was the owner of the vehicle in front of his house. The officer did not say, quote, "I'll be seeing you," end quote, as the complainant reported and stated he felt threatened by the officer's statement. Therefore, it's recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Additionally, after review of the body-worn camera footage, the investigation found the following comments by one of the officers to be rude and discourteous. The officer said to the complainant, quote, "I need to see who I'm talking to since you are running your mouth. Quote, you're the one on your porch, come outside and do something," and, quote, "You're going to come after somebody with guns outside, get back inside, man, get back inside, gangster," end quote. The Columbus Department Inspector General concludes the officer's comments to the complainant were rude and discourteous, this being a violation of CPD policies, and it's recommended officers' actions be found sustained misconduct on allegation, or on the sustained dig allegation. So again, it's a reminder, allegation 1 is,
Did they add that to the?
yes.
Okay, so you need to make two
Oh,
more.
yeah. Yep. So that's what I'll do here on this one, because this is going to be the last one.
What case number is that?
This is case number 0897.
Okay.
So, unfounded on allegations 1, 2, and 3, which our committee agreed with, and then there was a sustained Department Inspector General allegation on the dig allegation here.
Okay, so you've got one motion on 230897 to accept the recommendations, and then a
Yes.
second separate motion to accept a sustained finding on the IG's initiated allegation.
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, second on both?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we've got open motions on case numbers 23-1353, 23-0922, and an open motion and an additional allegation on case number 23-0897. All in favor, please raise your hands.
Go.
All right.
Chair Burns, before we motion to adjourn, may I just summarize what I think we were asking the DIG's office with respect to reports? What I understood was that you're going to provide a report that breaks out those cases where you sustained the allegations or added your own findings that were sustained, so that we could see just percentages. Is that right?
Is the anniversary report I have that I set out for everybody should have all of that information on there. What it does is it lists all the allegations. It tells you how they were sustained, not sustained. It's all broken out based on the
Is it
allegation.
broken out by percentage? Is that all?
It's not broken out by percentages, but I can give it to you at percentages. What I did is I broke it out by each individual allegation, so everybody is able to see each, and it's on the last page.
All right.
So you can
Maybe
see
I
what
just
the
missed that.
allegations are. It tells you which ones were sustained, which ones were exonerated, and it just gives you a breakdown. We can talk after the meeting if there's something different specifically. This one I gave to the board in July. The board will be getting a end of the year report, most likely, probably, I say in February, because coming back in January, I'm not sure if we're going to have all the totals for December that we'll be putting in there. But I can break that down by percentages.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. It's on page.
It's on the last page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're
we can
saying,
add.
but yeah, we didn't have the, okay, I see what you're doing.
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I was going to add something.
Then we were also asking for a summary of recommendations for both policy recommendations and then reviews of policies, right?
Yeah, and then part of that is CPD of the completed cases that have gone.
Well, that was a third.
Yeah,
That was a
okay.
third report, so there was this percentage report, there was some kind of a list of, here's the policy reviews that we asked for to be forwarded to CPD, here's the policy recommendations we were making that were going to be forwarded to CPD. So that was a second report. And then the third report was the status of the recommendations of the disciplinary actions that we were recommending, but just where are those, if we could get a status report.
And I believe Stephanie actually has really been keeping the track, so I know I can speak with her. I know she's got a list of a continuous list of all the policy recommendations that the board has. I don't know if she sent that out, but you and I talk about that. Yeah.
The policy reviews is going to be on admin staff.
Oh, okay.
With the CPRB versus the DIG.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I just wanted to add, since Board Member Strickland mentioned that there are some reports that, there's some cases that they have questions on. We didn't receive any questions, so I would ask, if his committee is able to submit those questions to us prior to the next meeting so that, at least we can answer them and provide you any information that will help you in making the decision, come the next meeting.
Yeah, oh, yeah, for sure. And I think just the big question that I do want to make sure we have on the table for future meetings is, would love to see any sort of summary or outcome from completed cases, the status report, even if it's a few. I mean, we haven't heard anything yet, so I don't know where we're going to get that information, but that's a request, and maybe we can have a conversation with our chair and your office in terms of the interaction with CPD to get that information so that we can then evaluate our recommendations.
And I just wanted to add, I know that there was a question that the board had on case 220441. So what I was able to pull up, just so you know, this is the case involving the complainant being pregnant. So the complainant came into the office. She did a walk-in complaint on December the 31st, 22 at 3 p.m. The complainant did walk in. She walked in with her son. Based on what the investigator told me, she did not look like she was pregnant, nor did the son look like he was a juvenile. So just wanted to provide that information to the board.
But the child was 12, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
appearance-wise, I just want to get us away from feeding further into the narrative that a black 12-year-old is dangerous, menacing, or much older than what he actually is.
Yeah, and then also her walking in 2 months after the.
No, this was before the complaint was filed.
But
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
event happened
It
on-
was October 22. It was
So
October. It's my fault. It's
And so she
October.
walked in that day, or?
Yeah, she filed the complaint, yeah.
Okay, well, still
Just,
make those
just,
perceptions,
just
but-
putting down what the perception was
What
the
they said versus-
investigators as to
yeah.
what they saw versus, maybe
Okay.
in
I-
line with what the officer.
That's fair.
Perceptions.
Yeah, that's fair. And he did not, in fact, know whether or not this person was pregnant. So I do think that is important. All right,
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
second.
May I have a second? All in favor, please raise your hands. Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned.